Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Part 2. So, in this video, we are going to be taking a look at another biomech game between... Nope, we don't want to listen to the commentators, but between Flash and Soulkey. And in this game, a quick overview is that Flash ends up going for double armories for his kind of like mech opener, and then he transitions into I believe it's just one engineering bay. So he kind of is leaning more heavily towards the mech portion of this style, and he isn't relying as heavily on bio as fantasy was, because fantasy got the double upgrades for bio and only one upgrade for his mech army. An important thing to note in this game is even though Flash loses this game, he still could have won it. When I rewatched it for the second time earlier today, I noticed that Flash, like he had the solid fundamentals in place, but he didn't have a couple things in his play fine-tuned, so he ended up losing as a result of that. One thing to note in this game versus the one between Fantasy and Life is that Fantasy never lost a significant portion of his mech army. He always had those like 5 siege tanks in his army and a couple Thors. He never really lost them at all. So the main portion of Fantasy's army was never lost, and so that's why he was able to develop such a bank. Flash kind of trades away his mech part of his army kind of poorly, and as a result, he kind of gets starved for money. He also doesn't put as heavy of an emphasis on taking his 4th base, whereas Fantasy secured his 4th base by about the 15 to 16 minute mark when he pushed out. And another big mistake of Flash's was not scanning for any creep tumors with his initial Hellion Force that we saw Fantasy do in the first game. He did it 3 times. Fantasy scanned once over here, and then twice over here, and then once over here in about a 5-minute time period, I believe, from like 14 minutes, or I think it was 12 minutes to about 18 minutes ish. And Flash, on the other hand, he's not going to be doing that as well, so we're going to see a big difference in creep spread from Soulkey, which is something that plays a significant role in kind of just the Zerg having map control. I think the reason behind this for Flash is that he was playing this more as a mech build with the addition of some bio units. Fantasy, on the other hand, was playing his build as a mech opener, but transitioning into heavy bio. So just the contrasting between the two styles, I think the benefits for opening up double armories in one engineering bay is that you have a much stronger transition into Sky Terran if you so choose to transition out. Whereas Fantasy's build is kind of, you don't really have that fast of a transition into Sky Terran, but I think that's okay because you don't really have, the only reason why you need to transition into a Sky Terran army is to deal with hive tech units, and just kind of get that really big, really nice cost efficiency out with your Ravens and battle cruisers. But if you transition into Sky Terran, you start to make your ground army weaker. It's okay to have like maybe 1 to 3 Ravens in your army, but if you have, let's say like 5 to 10, like an Avilo number of Ravens, then you start cutting into your siege tank and Thor count, and your Bioforce also becomes significantly smaller as well. So it's all just a give and take about unit compositions here, and it's really whatever unit composition you want here. So we see on the production tab, Flash getting 2 armories. He's getting that Viking to clear out overlords as well. It's important to deny scouting as long as possible so that the Zerg player doesn't know you're going for a mech, or you're going for this biomech style. And also, it's also useful for clearing out overlords like that, because if you try to send some Marines, then the Zerglings can just clean it up. Whereas if you have a Viking, it will be unharassed by the Zerglings. They'll be able to clear out the Overlord. That, like, usually a good player will have your creep spread at the third base. I think it's more unusual not to see an Overlord with creep at your third than it is to see an Overlord with creep at your third. Soulkey is a very good player, and so small details like that do not go unchecked by him. And he's also getting a very, very fast Spire. I've noticed it in the recent Pro League videos. I think this is maybe a couple weeks old, but Effort versus someone, I can't remember who, I think it was Ty. Effort got a super fast Spire on 2 bases, similar to what Soulkey is doing. And Flash, he's doing a very good job scouting with his Reapers. This Reaper is able to see the Spire, a huge bonus. So Flash immediately knows that it's not going to be any kind of roaches. He already had a good idea that it was not going to be roaches because no Evo Chambers and just Speedlings, delayed third base, and just Queens and, like, once again, Queens and Speedlings for defense. So he already had a pretty good idea it was Mutalisks, but those Reapers just kind of confirmed it. And scouting is very important because now Flash knows that there's Mutalisks out on the map. And I'm just going to pause it really quickly here to explain a point. The next transition for Soulkey after making these initial 8 Mutalisks is to either make more Mutalisks and get a really big Mutalisk ball out, or to transition into some sort of other tech. In this case, Soulkey gets the initial Mutalisks to force turrets and Thors, and then he switches into Swarmhosts relatively fast. So just keep that in mind. That's kind of what Soulkey's gameplay is, and we'll see how Flash kind of handles it and how he makes a total of 4 Thors, I believe. And I think that's really good of him not overcommitting to Thors, because if you overcommit to Thors and don't make siege tanks fast enough, then switches like Swarm Hosts after the initial Mutalisks will do a lot of damage because you won't have a high enough siege tank count to kind of prevent the Locust from doing anything. So one thing to take note of here is that, okay, so kind of missed it, but the 2 Thors are in this corner. So one is right there and another one is right there. And 2 more are building. So one Thor is going to be split off to the third base and the other Thor is going into the main. And this is what you have to do for Mutalisk defense, by the way. Or this is what Flash does anyhow. So he's a Thor over there and he has another Thor over there. He split them up to deal with the Mutalisks, and the Mutalisks are kind of forced to be driven away because they've taken more damage, and Soulkey doesn't want to throw away any more Mutalisks than he has to. And now we see on the minimap, Flash still has 1 Thor over here, and then he has 1 Thor at the third base too, and 2 more Thors are about to pop out. So if we take a look at the Mutalisks on the minimap, they're just kind of flying around. This Thor is in position to deal with the Mutalisks, and any second now, 2 more Thors are going to be able to pop out. The 1 Thor is moving. This Thor came all the way from the main base where that little dot is. Flash basically, as soon as he saw the Thor or the Mutalisks over here and going towards this natural base, he started a turret over here, and the Thor, which was at the same place where the turret is currently building, was rotated towards the natural base to deal with these Mutalisks. And of course the Thor at the third base also came to over here to the natural to help shoo away the Mutalisks if they chose to stay any longer. So I'll just kind of play that over once again. So the Thor is going down right over there. And the Thor from the third is going to the natural, wherever the Mutalisks are. And now the Mutalisks are kind of like forced to back up. That's just really good positional play by Flash and not overcommitting to this kind of defense. As we see here, Flash getting the +1 attack. He's only going to be on 1 engineering bay, like I said earlier. And so this like Thor positioning, it allowed Flash to not have to make more turrets than he had to. I believe he has a total of like 2 per base max, and he didn't have to make a single Viking. He made that 1 initial Viking to clear out some Overlords, and he didn't need to make any Widow Mines either to deal with this relatively fast Mutalisk rush. So Soulkey, he's been able to get a decent amount of damage done. He picked off some SCVs, he forced some anti-defense or anti-air defense. Now he's transitioning into Swarm Hosts. Oh boy, oh boy. And I think the Flash, what he's doing here is he keeps making Hellbats right now, and he's gonna push out with a large Hellbat force, and I think the reason behind this, having all of these Hellbats, is to be able to push against all of like a Swarmhost transition, because Hellbats can kind of clear 1 to 2 waves of Locusts before they kind of die. But one thing we to note here is that although Flash is he's doing a biomech style like fantasy, the one important thing he hasn't done yet is he hasn't cleared any of this creep spread yet. He kind of can't, I guess, because of the mutalisks from Soulkey. Because if he sent his Hellions out, then he wouldn't have been able to clear it. But I still think he should have done at least one scan before the mutalisks came out. But he was too occupied with trying to scout with his Reapers to see what kind of tech opening that Soulkey was doing. And the other important factor besides the creep that is different from the game between fantasy and life is that there's no medevacs producing. Flash doesn't have a single medevac out on the field either. He's kind of like not macroing as good as he should have. He has 2 armories, remember? He built the 2 double armories, but he's not researching his upgrades. He has the gas to do it, but he's kind of just his economics isn't as great right now, so that things flow very smoothly. He's kind of delayed his 2 armories haven't been doing anything for about a minute now. And like he's really just emphasizing on the barracks production as well right now, powering up and adding all those barracks to get that explosion of Marines. And with that, he's also delaying his starport production. He has enough gas to actually make both of the upgrades at the armory and 2 medevacs at a time. So he's not being limited by gas. He's being limited by what he's choosing to spend his minerals in, which is kind of interesting. And like we see, he has the starport over there. It's ready to make medevacs, but he just kind of he's not focusing on making medevacs. Like he's focusing on his upgrades more than his medevacs. He still has money to make medevacs. 0 medevacs out in the field. And by this time, Fantasy had already made a second round of medevacs, so he had a total of 4 medevacs out on the field at the same exact timing. Now, I understand that Flash, like, his macro isn't the best right now, but you also have to understand that in a Pro League type setting, Flash basically does a different build every week. So he's given less than a week to learn an entirely new build for his match in the Pro League. And I think that's really showing that just how he hasn't had enough time to prepare and fine tune going this kind of a biomech style. Kind of like just delaying those medevacs is just really, really important. And we'll see later on when Flash ends up pushing, he's only going to have 2 medevacs, and that's just he doesn't have enough energy or medevacs to like. Okay, so he started his 2 medevacs now, finally. But it's just kind of just really off, and it took him a really long time to start the medevac production. And that also it also makes his drop play weaker. So right now, Soulkey's next transition after the 8 initial mutalisks was to make swarmhosts, and I think he has like a total of like 16 swarmhosts right now. So one of the strengths of going biomech is that against swarmhost play, normally if you're going just for a pure mech style, you're going to have to be constrained to these bases while you're and like have siege tanks in position to defend against this kind of a locust attack. And that creep spread is freaking scary. But if you have the option of dropping, like you have medevacs and you have marines, you have the option of doing bio drops against the locusts, and swarm hosts are not really good at dealing with bio drops. Mostly because you can't. It's really easy to outposition and outmaneuver these slow locusts and the even slower swarm hosts. So a good choice by Flash, or like a good option if Flash had produced medevacs faster, would have been doing some multi-pronged drops. And we see Soulkey doesn't have any mutalisks either. He's cut all mutalisk production. So 5 mutalisks on the field is not enough to clean up a drop. It's not even like you have to catch the drop in mid-air, and even then you can boost away and land your marines, and you'll still keep your drop alive. And once again, I'm just gonna emphasize this like kind of Hellbat production. Flash, kind of like he's making a lot of Hellbats, and he's continuing Hellbat production. I don't hate the idea. I actually kind of like it because it's going to give him a lot of strength pushing through this kind of swarm host based play. However, because Flash has no medevacs, he has two medevacs for like 20 Hellbats and 20 Marines. So like yeah, he has two medevacs when he's pushing out, and he has all of those units. So every stim is gonna hurt his army significantly, and all the damage that like those Hellbats take, it's gonna like he only has two medevacs for all of those Hellbats and Marines. I don't know what else to say except that it's gonna hurt him to like take any big fights. He has to take one perfect engagement. He doesn't really have enough regeneration energy from the medevacs to support more than like one stim max from these Marines. And as we see here, Flash is moving out with his army. There's the first stim with the Marines. Okay, that's one stim. And now these locusts, or the swarm hosts, have kind of moved to defend against this. And Flash kept his siege tanks over here until the swarm hosts move, and now the swarm hosts move. So Flash is bringing his siege tanks. I like that by him. But what I just don't like is the lack of medevacs. He only has 3 medevacs now. And if you take a look at these Hellbats, they're going to be able to clean up these locusts relatively easily. And like, yeah, he cleared up that wave really fast, and now Flash is able to get some positioning, and he's going to be able to deny Soulkey's 1, 2, 3, 4. He's going to be able to deny Soulkey's 5th base. However, there's only 3 medevacs, so like there's just not enough energy going around to heal up all these Hellbats at once, and Flash is gonna, I think he's gonna stim here again soon. And like if we saw the health bars, we would see that Flash's army would be extremely, extremely weak right now because the medevacs haven't gotten a chance to heal up all of his stuff. So right now would have been a good time for Flash to kind of back off, maybe do a drop over here to clear some creep or harass the bases, or do some other kind of pressure, and to also kind of like take a 4th base maybe. It's 17 minutes in. Flash has no 4th base in production. He has no 4th base finished as well, so he's extremely late on 4 bases. So this is kind of very all in by Flash at this point because he's only on a 3 base economy and Soulkey is on 4 bases. So one of the things that Fantasy didn't do was he never lost his kind of core mech part, the Thors and the siege tanks. And this is in Flash, he's going to end up losing this entire army, and that's kind of just because he overextended, and I think it's just because of his lack of experience of playing this style. So look what happens in about half a minute when Soulkey's banelings come from 2 angles, and Flash is even fighting on creep as well. He just stimmed again. There's another stim. So I'm sure all of these Marines have like 0 health. They almost be an orange health, and that makes these banelings even stronger. And now Flash is going to lose 6+ siege tanks, and he loses at least 1 Thor. It was a very, very costly trade for Flash, and this is where the game kind of ends now because Flash has no 4th base. The Fantasy versus Life game, Fantasy had a 4th base down in mining by this time, whereas Flash doesn't have a 4th base even started, and Flash overcommitted with his army and lost a significant chunk of it. His tank count has been reset, so he's back to like 2 to 3 siege tanks against 16 swarm hosts, and that's not a good thing. And he's also lost like all of his Bioforce and all of his Hellbats, and his Thor count has been reset as well. That's Flash's army right now. He has a lot more medevacs. He has 7, but he only has 4 siege tanks because he lost like 7 to 8 of them with that attack. Now we see Flash kind of recognizing that there are... So this drop kind of signifies that in the game, Flash has recognized, like he's very good at reading the game and what's going on. He's recognized that, I'm going to say it one more time, he's recognized that Soulkey has no mutalisks. Soulkey has 5 mutalisks on the field and they're doing nothing. They're on vacation because Soulkey uses them every single game, and these mutalisks are just on strike. They don't want to work anymore. Killing Terran units are not fun. So, Flash knows there are no mutalisks. He's starting to drop. He's kind of, like he has the medevac count to do it as well. He even if he recognized it earlier on with the first two medevacs, he wouldn't have had that medevac count to do drops and to push at the same time because he just didn't have enough medevacs to heal up his army. I really wish I saw the health bars because I swear to God, I would even put money on it that most of his army would have been an orange to yellow health. Like, I don't think there would have been maybe like one or two green units, but the medevacs were definitely being overworked. So Flash recognizing that drops are now going to be able to do a lot more damage because Soulkey has no mutalisks, and Flash really he needs to circumvent these locusts because there's no way he can just fight them up front. He's lost his siege tank count, and like he's getting. I don't really know what Flash's game plan is from here. I think like I said, I think he just didn't have enough time to prepare this kind of a style for Soulkey. He stopped at +2 attack, and now he's getting +1 armor, and he's also going to be at 3/3 upgrades. But all he has is Hellbats. Like the only units that are going to benefit from the +3 vehicle armor upgrades are Hellbats, Medivacs, and maybe Thors if they're fighting locusts. But siege tanks, they're going to always be in the back. The only time they're going to be attacked is when you're caught out of position like Flash was. Flash doing another drop to kind of spread Soulkey thin. He needs to do something to get himself back in the game. Soulkey, though, he's rebuilding up his mutalisk count, which I like as well. I think it's mostly to deal with these drops that Flash is doing. But these drops are kind of just too little too late. And Flash is just kind of not in a good position because he still doesn't have his 4th base. Soulkey, he's double expanding, so he's going to have a 5th base soon, most likely 6 bases. And Soulkey, he's kind of just making a bunch of Zerglings and Banelings and making Locusts as well. So even though Flash does have a better army, Soulkey's going to win this game because he has a better economy. And like Flash has a really good army. And he has a good army, but he has no economy. He can't even produce fully. His main's probably mined out by now. His natural's going to be mined out pretty soon. There's the drops coming in again. It's kind of a last-ditch effort, but the supply difference tells the game. Flash has 3 factories. He can only produce 2 siege tanks at a time. I'm pretty sure he has more than... I think he can make like 9 Marines at a time, but he can't do that. So he's just really starved for money at this point, and he can't remax his army. Soulkey's maxed out. He probably has like 40 larvae. He has enough money to max out again if he loses a chunk of his army. And Flash's 4th base is finally down, but it's just kind of too little too late. So, do I want to finish the game? Flash does some more dropping, but Soulkey, he just has more bases than Flash does. And like, I just jumped ahead a little bit. Soulkey still has a big bank. Flash has no money. He can't even max out. He's at 150 supply. So I'm just not going to finish that game because that's pretty much where it ends, and Flash has already made the game-ending mistakes. The differences in his play between Fantasy was getting the 2nd armory, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it can benefit Hellbats if you're going to go for a Hellbat heavy mech bio style like what Flash was doing, and the benefits of that is that you're able to kind of do a lot more damage against the locust waves, and you're able to clear them up. But Flash kind of just, he didn't have enough medevacs, so he couldn't re-heal his army up. So what some Terran players do is when they push like that against locust waves, they also pull some SCVs so that they can repair the Hellbats. So you just kind of need some sort of regeneration ability, otherwise the swarmhosts are just going to tear apart your army slowly and steadily. So that was, I'm not going to really call it a mistake, but I think the low medevac count was definitely an error on Flash's part, and also not being able to clear the creep fast enough as well. I think the first time Flash scanned to clear creep was when he pushed out at about 15 minutes. And as we saw in the game, Soulkey's creep spread was like more than halfway across the map. Very, very scary. Not something you want to deal with as a Terran player. And I think the last big thing to say is the medevac drops, when Soulkey, he made the initial 8 mutalisks, 8 mutalisks, and he lost 3 of them, so now there's just 5 mutalisks. So when there's like not that many mutalisks left, then drops become a lot more effective. Soulkey towards the end made about a total of like 10 to 11 so that he could pick off dropships in like the air, and even if they boosted away, if they started dropping marines, he'd still be able to kill it in time. 5 mutalisks can't kill anything. And yeah, I think against swarmhost play, Flash was doing a good job, but his army just became too weak because of the overstims, and the medvacs just couldn't support his army. And by that time, he should have backed right up because he didn't have a 4th base either. His 4th base should have really started. I guess that's another mistake, not having a good economy to back up his push. His push did a good amount of damage. It was able to deny the 5th, clear some creep, but Soulkey was able to clean it up before he got a 2nd base. But I think getting a 2nd base is kind of overeager. Fantasy, he only went for 1 base at a time. He never overextended and tried to get 2 bases, let alone get a base on creep at all. He was always off of creep, and he did a good job of keeping the creep under control. So yeah, I think I went over everything. So that pretty much brings the end to this part 2. And I think part 3 is going to be either Byung versus the Zerg he plays, or Maru versus Effort. I think I'm going to do Maru versus Effort next. But I don't really have a specific order in doing this. It's just whatever game's freshest in my mind. But together, it's, I hope like all of these, watching all of these videos will help form kind of a better understanding of this biomech style. So talk to you guys soon. Peace.